there are other frameworks that are perhaps more human, that are more,
What
that are
makes them more
less.
human
I don't think I said more human. I said there is something fundamentally
You
human.
said more human.
We committed a genocide.
Why were we able to do that?
I'm a bit stunned by what you're implying.
No, you're acting in a kind of passive-aggressive way.
To a white man sitting and saying to me, and why were we able to commit genocide on them? You're very reductive. I thought you were a lot more intellectual than this.
The moment I say something you don't like, you become aggressive and highly emotional.
Aggressive and highly emotional. It's not that it was offensive, it scared me.
Okay,
This
unreasonable.
is quite controlling what you...
Welcome back to Tyler TV, guys. In this video, we're going to be watching Konstantine debating a lunatic leftist feminist who comes to trigonometry with her tail between her legs because the feminists have lost a culture war so bad that now they need to be using these other platforms to try to get views, and the sheer amount of gaslighting in the face of her arguments, time and time again, Konstantine calling her out. It's insane. This one is actually absolutely hilarious, and we're going to rip through all of her arguments. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do, go ahead and smash the like button, share, and subscribe, and let's get into it.
My book is about how to have conversations better, both with people on your side of the divide, but also reaching across the divide. So I can't really then say, oh, you think differently from me, I don't want to come and talk to you. That's exactly what I need to be doing. And I listened to your podcast, and I also felt like you guys were like reasonable, and I could have a good chat to you. What I'm not interested in doing is, you know, when you go on the BBC and they say, oh, you've got to talk to this person for balance, and there's somebody that is actually quite, like for me, someone who goes, I don't believe in climate change at all. I think feminists are bitches and witches. I'm like, well, it just would take too long in a 20-minute interview to get there. So what are we doing? And then I think we're just doing gladiatorial arena sports. So, but I want to talk to people who I think are intelligent, who think differently from me, because otherwise, what are we doing? Just sitting there congratulating ourselves in our little group.
So she's come on saying that she wants to be able to have a conversation. This is what her book's about. We're about to find out that these kinds of people are actually incapable of actually doing that. But the real reason is because the progressive feminists have been slammed in this culture war. Their audience is dwindling as women are actually realizing that they're being lied to. The only real audience they have left is this aging, childless cat lady audience, which is also dwindling.
I don't live alone. I live with 3 cats. I had a dream once with my cat Ginger that I was breastfeeding her.
So she thinks she can come on the Trigonometry podcast, which I would probably think it's more left. But she thinks that she can come on the podcast that normally she just would go and crap on and gain some audience share, get some eyeballs, sell some copies. Because, you know, they're pretty reasonable guys.
People who I think are intelligent.
Just note that if these feminists weren't losing the culture war so bad, she would not touch this podcast. She would sit in her echo chamber, call guys like Konstantine far right, and maybe go on Good Morning Britain. So maybe that this culture war is actually just pulling people out of their caves. It's a massive W for us. And we're going to see Konstantine dismantle her arguments constantly. It just goes to show how much her points actually suck. So now, let's get into the meat.
You said in the blurb for your book that you're not anti-woke.
I don't think I would have... Did I say anti-woke? I don't think I would have used the word woke, but maybe I did.
It says in the blurb of the book, but we... I guess...
I'm definitely not anti-woke, no.
Yes.
But
what I was going to ask you is, why is that? Why aren't you anti-woke?
Well, I think, what does woke mean to you? That's my question.
Well,
back.
all the very things that you said are the reason you wrote your book. The reason that people would say we're anti-woke, I'm certainly anti-woke, I have no issue describing it, is I'm anti the, oh, you used this wrong phrase, oh, you made fun of this thing that I don't like, oh, you're not sufficiently inclusive of this, blah, 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 oh, you know, you're a man, you need to be quiet while other people talk, all of this stuff. I reject this entirely. I reject the identity politics of it. I reject the censorship aspect of it. I reject the the obsession with victimhood, which I think is damaging and it's making people into victims. That's what I mean by woke, and that's what I'm against. So
I think the reason I would describe myself as not anti-woke is because I think what a lot of people mean by woke, and it's a soup, it's a rich soup. Mm-hmm. So you can take out certain things and go, that's woke. But I think a lot of people see it and go, well, woke is, an idea about gender or an idea about feminism that I haven't fully explored. It just sounds new, or it just sounds, like something that I don't have any particular knowledge of or empathy for. So that goes in the woke basket because it's new.
I don't think your characterization is quite accurate. I don't think most people's view of what woke is this thing that they don't understand, but because it's new, they don't like it. It's more like suddenly we all have to pretend that if you say something that about your identity, now it's true. Like if I say I'm a woman, I become a woman in that moment. And a lot of people don't dislike that because it's new. A lot of people don't dislike that because they think it's factually inaccurate.
Sure. Well, that's a very, very big subject. And there's a very, very big, chunky chapter on that in my book. And I think that's something that...
What's your argument on that?
What I'm doing is, first of all, looking at how the brain works and why our brain is sort of a prediction machine. It's the autocomplete on your phone, really. It's always going through the world and it's looking for things that aren't as the brain would expect them to be. So if you got on a bus and the bus driver was dressed like a clown, you would double take. Now, there's no reason to suspect that clown is going to hurt you or that there's nothing pejorative about the bus driver being dressed like a clown, but you would notice. If you got on the bus driver was dressed as a bus driver, you probably wouldn't notice the bus driver at all. If you're in London where you get on buses and you don't say anything to the bus driver, there's so many people. And someone said later, who was the bus driver? What they look like? You probably wouldn't know. But as soon as they're dressed like a clown, your brain goes, what? I've got questions. If 30% of bus drivers dress like clowns for a year, you would stop noticing.
I don't think I would, no.
I
would continue to notice that they're dressed like clowns.
For how long?
For all eternity, because I know what a bus driver is supposed to look like.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So your brain works different from other human beings then in that case.
Because if we accept your premise of how people's brains work, yes. But
okay.
My assertion to you is that a lot of people have a standard that they expect, that they learn at a certain point, and they don't stop noticing things being different to that. Like if everybody started walking around naked, I wouldn't at one point go, actually, yeah, I don't remember a time when nobody... You see what I mean?
So she really thought there that she had a point with the clown bus driver thing, but which is absolutely hilarious. Then she tries to gaslight Konstantine into saying that, well, that's because you're different from the whole population.
Interesting. Yeah. So your brain works different from other human beings then in that case.
And on the topic of gaslighting, this woman is a master. And we're going to point out all the occasions that she does that. But yes, I agree with Konstantine. If 30% of bus drivers started dressing as clowns, for no particular reason, yeah, I would notice, and I would continue noticing, and it would continue making me really uncomfortable. What she's trying to do is just make a point about culture and saying that the only reason that we are not comfortable with seeing men and women's changing rooms or men and women's sports or in dresses teaching their children, because it's something new. We're going to adapt to it. Just give it some time and everybody will get used to it. No, it doesn't really look like that is what's happening. How about this analogy? If 30% of bus drivers started telling your kids that they can transition to be the opposite sex, or 30% of bus drivers started wearing BDSM on buses, after a while, would you stop noticing? No. As long as that sort of thing happened, parents and their baseball bats would continue to notice. Now, on to the next part where she tries to give the argument where the ancient people were non-binary.
So, what we have to do then is look at, is there any history of transgenderism throughout the ages? And I looked into this because I looked at indigenous societies, and I thought, well, there will be some, people fear what's different. So there will be indigenous societies where there weren't transgender people accepted. And I looked and I looked and I looked and I could not find any. It was completely normal in most societies for this to be not a binary thing, for it not to be male and female, but for it to be more like a scale. So if you walk past a building and, you know, a bar, and someone says, is it loud in there? You understand that that person is saying, yes, it is loud in there, but they mean loud for them, because there's loud and there's soft, there's high and there's low, there's young and there's old. We're all old to someone and we're all young to someone, right? We're all old to a 7-year-old. We're all young to an 80-year-old, right? So there's very few things where we go, it's this or it's that. You might have heard of the American Two-Spirit people, and a Native American Two-Spirit. You guys heard of that?
Yeah.
That was created like around in the 90s at a conference, an LGBTQ plus conference, when Indigenous people, Native American people were like, we have to explain it to the Westerners because they keep using, it was like a sort of slur for Indigenous queer people that was often used. And they said, right, they see it as this and that. So let's say we're two. So whenever you hear that third gender in Indigenous spaces, it's not really, that's done through a Western framework of two and therefore a third. But if you talk to people in Indigenous cultures, it's like it's not a third for us because it's more like a piano scale.
So before we get into the back and forth of this, she's trying to be super duper intellectual about this. Like she's looking at it from the roots of civilization, from a different level of analysis. This must just be a part of human nature because she found some indigenous cultures said they were two-spirited, and she speaks about them like they were a monolith because some modern at a conference in the 90s said that this was the case. But the fact is that there were hundreds and hundreds of different indigenous American tribes that we know of, probably way more. It's actually kind of insulting to use them to try to substantiate their modern queer theory. Aztec society was actually gender determined, and there were social expectations. Boys were associated with public life, agriculture, and warfare. Girls were associated with weave preparation and family care. The point she's trying to make, if you take away Abrahamic religions, you get societies that believe in some sort of androgyny, which is the opposite, actually, of the truth. This is what's shared in these modern Western cultures. The more primitive a society is, the more likely they are to have very, very rigid gender roles because they need it for survival. Let's carry on.
But I don't agree. And the reason is that I'm not a Western person by birth, and Francis has experiences of outside. And the idea that male and female are Western categories is just it's not true. In fact, I would
not just Western, but you see what I mean about indigenous societies.
Yes, but indigenous societies are like 0.0001% of the entire population of human beings on the planet. And the more east you go, the more the traditional societies are, and the more the male and female rigidity is enforced, actually. The West is actually pretty loose about them. The idea that the male-female binary is a Western concept is just not factually accurate.
Okay, so stop there.
Yeah.
I'm talking about indigenous people who lived all over the world.
Yeah.
Until we had... So when you say... The trouble with saying it's not Western is colonization did bring a lot of more fixed ideas. So I'm from...
Hold on a second. Sorry, no, I'm not going to let that pass. Are you saying people in the Duchy of Muscovy 2,000 years ago?
No. But I only just started the sentence. So I said, for example, colonization did export a lot of very Christian, quote unquote Christian, not necessarily Christian ideals around the world. So my example was, I think it's hard to talk about the whole globe, but my example was in Australia. You may know Australian Aboriginals have the idea of brother boys and sister girls, and they are genderqueer people. But of course, when let's be honest, white Christian colonizers came and turned up. They said, that's not a thing and you're not allowed to do that. And said that that's wrong. And there was a lot of shaming that's gone on. Now, that obviously has infiltrated into the Aboriginal population now. There's still brother boys and there's still sister girls, but there's a lot of homophobia in the Aboriginal population that didn't exist before it was imposed.
But you're not addressing my argument. My argument is not that there aren't indigenous communities where these practices exist. My argument is that is by far and away a tiny minority of the global population of humans.
I don't really understand how that matters, though, because it's still the archaic way people behave. If
99% of people do something and 0.1% of people do something different.
Do you know why indigenous populations are so small, though? isn't it?
The point I'm trying to make to
Do
you
you know
is,
why they're so small?
Hold on a second.
But do you know why they're so small?
You're deflecting from the argument that I'm making.
Not really.
Yes, you are. The argument that I made to you is when you said this is a Western concept, I gave you examples.
Yeah.
For example, the Duchy of Muscovy or Russia 600 years ago.
So when I say Western,
Yeah.
I'm speaking because that's where I'm having the arguments, is in the West.
Okay.
Now, obviously, there are Eastern places too, but I'm talking about Western frameworks. It's unlikely I'm going to come in here in Kent and start talking about, Far Eastern concepts.
I think you're mishearing what I'm saying. You made the claim that outside of the West, in indigenous societies, these things are very normal. And the point I'm making to you is, while it may be the case in certain tiny communities that exist, hold on a second, that exist in certain tiny communities, bless you, Francis, outside of the West, there are also lots of other civilizations outside of the West where the gender binary that you were talking about as a Western concept is actually much more firmly enforced than it is in the West. In the Islamic civilization, in the Chinese civilization, in Russia, all over the world, in pretty much everywhere. So bringing up tiny indigenous communities does not prove the case.
Okay, but indigenous communities tend to be, I think, it's more archaic. It's more what it was before we brought in all these religious frameworks. You're still talking about the Muslim world. You're still talking about an Abrahamic framework.
Okay, what about the Chinese?
I don't know. I haven't looked into the Chinese enough about
1.4 billion people.
Okay, this argument kills me. So the indigenous cultures are more archaic and primitive, and they're a better reflection of what culture should be without all this Christianity stuff? You know what? I agree. I think we should all just go back to wearing leaves on our genitals and sacrificing virgins to the sun gods. Capturing prisoners and cutting out their hearts like the Aztecs? Or maybe we should be implementing female genital mutilation like they do in Africa. I bet they'd be really cool with that. Maybe they were right about skull binding in indigenous tribes. What about tooth avulsion when she was doing her extensive research, when they would use stone tools to split the boy's genitals for initiation into the tribe? Or slavery. Obviously, the ancient tribes provide a very thorough insight. So how about implementing war brides used as concubines, or men as forced labor? At least this way we wouldn't be confined to all these stupid ideas like Christianity, the notions of human dignity, inherent human value, and, controlling the passions or abolishing slavery. Okay, wouldn't be trapped in this Western civilization with all the scientific advancements, culture, genius, literature, philosophy. Just strip that all away and just take me back. Now, let's watch the manipulation and gaslighting go into full effect.
I think what I'm trying to look at, if you really look at what I'm saying, is that there are other frameworks that are perhaps more human, that are more,
what
that
makes
are
them
less
more human?
Well, they're less driven by controlling regimes,
you like
or
them
controlling
more,
religions.
I get it, but I don't think that makes them more human. If 99% of humans do A, it seems to me that A is more human.
You must know. You're a bright man.
I am.
You
thank
must
you.
know. You must know. You're a public intellectual. You must know that 99%, given the recent population boom of people under draconian governments, under draconian binary religious ideals, doesn't dwarf an indigenous culture that has been there. Australian Aboriginals are the oldest indigenous culture in the world. Do you know why there's so few of them? We killed them.
Yes.
We committed a genocide.
Why were we able to do that? Why were we able to do that?
What are you implying?
I'm just asking you the question.
Are you implying because we're better?
No.
What are you implying?
We were technologically far more advanced. That's what I'm implying. What's not clear about that?
So you're saying...
I'm saying we were technologically more advanced. Would you
So you're saying we're
that?
superior to Australian Aboriginals?
That's quite the opposite of what I'm saying. I'm not saying we were superior. I'm saying we were technologically more advanced.
So how is that the opposite?
Superior implies a moral quality. I'm not making any moral implication. You seem to be. But what I'm saying is...
I think most people would hear it that way.
No.
Again, you're a very intelligent man. How would most people hear that?
Most people would hear what I'm saying for what I'm saying, which is...
Don't think they would. Why? What's the point of this question
The
then?
point of this question is
because we came in with our better gendered binaries,
sorry.
and therefore we were
Deborah,
able to
this
kill
is going
them.
to work a lot better if you just hear the point I'm making instead of
I
getting...
really cannot understand what it could possibly be other than we are better.
well, let me explain it to you what it could possibly be. And
What's it got to do with the gender binary?
your argument, we're just talking about the argument, and you seem to get quite heated about this, which is completely unnecessary. You think it's necessary?
I'm a bit stunned by what you're implying.
No, you're acting in a kind of passive-aggressive way, which indicates that you're not happy
I genuinely am being 100% authentic. My visceral reaction to a white man sitting and saying to me, and why were we able to commit genocide on them? And then just pausing.
Yes.
Is very visceral to me.
Well, let's go back. First of all, it's interesting that you brought up my skin color because I thought that was the exact opposite of the point you're trying to make in the book. But anyway, let's come back to the argument.
You haven't read my book, so you wouldn't know what the point is.
You said that the point of your book is it's all about you can't say this as a this person and whatever. But anyway, it doesn't matter.
You're very reductive. I thought you were a lot more intellectual than this.
I think this is very revealing, but let's come back to the argument. The argument you were making was that the Aboriginal society and other indigenous societies, as you call them, were more human because whatever reason, and they were therefore models for emulation for us.
I don't think I said more human. I said there is something fundamentally human.
You said more human. Yeah.
There's something fundamentally of how humans are before there's a whole heap of religious imposition and a whole heap of totalitarian imposition. That's what I'm saying. I think we can learn a lot from indigenous societies. I don't think you can say there's fewer of them, therefore they don't count.
That's not what I said.
When they were...
I didn't say they don't count. What I said is if 99% of a population, if 99% of pandas eat bamboo shoots, it's fair to say that eating bamboo shoots is the standard panda behavior. It's the more panda behavior than the 1% or the 0.1% they eat dog turds for a living. I gave you 4 arguments in response to the things that you said.
And we've only really got to one.
Well, yes, because you got upset at me saying something about the Aboriginals.
But what were you meaning by that? What were you meaning by why were we able to
I already told you what I meant by that.
Commit genocide?
We were technologically far more sophisticated.
And what's that got to do with it?
Well, if a civilization is able to produce things like penicillin and the ability for its children not to die in childbirth, I think that indicates that that civilization has something positive about it. The fact that the Western civilization has created the incredible material benefits and also other benefits of every kind that we now enjoy says something about the utility of that civilization and that worldview, which is that it is very good for human beings, which is one of the reasons that millions of people travel, many of them risking their lives, from other parts of the world to our societies today.
Okay, so Aboriginals didn't need penicillin because they didn't have any of the diseases. And they were living an incredibly brilliant nomadic life, so that what they would do is it would use a certain area, then they would move on, and then they would come back. So they didn't have any problems with holes in ozone layers, any problems with climate change, the incredible raging bushfires across across Australia right now. They didn't have that. So we brought in more problems than we did solutions.
So just a complete fantasy, once again glorifying ancient cultures, saying that they don't need medicine. They did everything great. It was perfect. They lived wonderful lives. Had an estimated infant mortality rate of 200 to 300 per 1,000 births to infections, malnutrition, and animal attacks. Life expectancy was between 30 and 40. They had no written language, industrial tools. Yeah, they were great stewards of the lands. But to glorify these cultures that as a better representation of human culture than Western civilization is crazy. And I can tell you the cultures that she talks about, they still exist in the far reaches of the Australian outback. So if she is so enamored with their culture, she can go and live with them and go on walkabouts in the outback. They have a great time doing it, but I don't know how long she would last. Now, on to the next part, which is about the far right, which is something to me is very revealing.
Elon Musk or Donald Trump were far right.
Definitely not.
They're literally cancelling everything. anything. They're cancelling. They're destroying lives
Okay,
right now.
perhaps we have a different definition of what far right is. What would you say? What's the definition of far right in your head?
What about them isn't far right? Is I would ask you.
But
what about what they're doing isn't far right?
Yeah, I understand your question. In order to answer your question, we both have to agree on a definition of far right.
They've literally said they've taken.
Just pause for a moment. What is your definition of far right?
It's far further than fiscal conservatism.
Okay.
It is social conservatism that says there is one proper way to live, and that way is a heteronormative family, 2.4 children. Women should be having babies. This is all Heritage Foundation values. This is all Project 2025.
Guys, very revealing moment there for me personally. I have officially been diagnosed as far right. For her, far right is thinking that society is best ordered when families have two-parent structure, a mother and a father, and women have babies to sustain the population. I guess I must be as far right as the eye can see. Now let's watch the next clip and just observe how much gaslighting and manipulation actually takes place.
You agree with them having them? How would they have got them?
See, you're demonstrating, and earlier in the interview, exactly the opposite of what you claim you're trying to do, which is the moment I say something you don't like, you become aggressive and highly emotional.
Aggressive and highly emotional? I'm just having a debate with you.
No.
I'm showing passion.
No, not especially not at the beginning you weren't. But anyway, what I'm saying to you is...
I didn't like one thing that you said in a way that I found unpleasant.
Yes.
And I did react to that.
Yes.
But if I don't...
So you're not reaching anyone who's listening to this conversation by doing that, is my point. So
you don't know that. You don't know who I'm reaching.
Oh, I know.
You
I
don't
know
who
audience
I'm
pretty
reaching.
well. I know audience pretty well.
Deborah,
I mean...
Can I just
let me just finish this.
But you're asking me to sit here as if it's just entirely intellectual and talk like this. Sometimes I feel passionate.
I'm not asking you to do anything. What I'm saying is you become... especially
hysterical, an hysterical woman. Is that what you're saying?
Well, see, you're demonstrating again. Now you're trying to put words in my mouth. You're trying to put me onto a template that already exists, which is a man calling
you.
Yes, yeah, you are. But every joke is only half joke, as we all know, right? So you are doing the thing that is going to put a lot of people off. What I'm saying to you is, if you want to reach across the spectrum, across the spectrum,
okay.
Well, look, let's be honest, right? You're very good at reaching people on the hard left, and you're very good at reaching women, and that's why they love your show.
But a lot of my people will turn in to see this as well, because I'll tell them it's on.
But you're not trying to reach them. You already reached them, right? You claim you want to reach people on the other side, right? That's what you're saying. Now, I think it's fair to say that I'm probably better than you at reaching people who are on the center and center right. Would that be fair? Yes.
Well, because you agree with them.
It's not because I agree with them. It's because I articulate arguments that resonate with some of them.
You seem really pissed off.
I'm not pissed. I'm not even remotely pissed off. I'm just trying to make clarity on this issue, right? So what I'm saying to you is, if you want to reach those people who I know how to reach, right?
I should agree with you.
No, you shouldn't agree with me. I'm just saying the strategy that you are displaying with your behavior is not going to be effective for reaching them.
I feel like, I don't know, Francis, am I shouting, am I swearing, or am I just going, how can you say that?
I didn't say that you were shouting or swearing.
What is the behaviour? It's just me leaning forward and going, come on now.
That's not the way you behaved earlier in the interview. Anyway.
Well, what you said was quite significant
to me. Was it offensive?
It was quite, it wasn't, it's not that it was offensive, it scared me.
Okay. So.
And so that did.
Right.
That did.
So anytime I say something that scares you, this is how you react. Whereas if you listen to what I was saying, it's actually perfectly logical and reasonable.
It's quite controlling what you're doing now.
Controlling.
You're controlling the way that I operate in the interview space, where I've done nothing inappropriate. No. I've just debated you.
No.
And most of the time I've agreed with you.
And I've agreed with you.
I've found masses of agreement with you.
And I found with you.
And where I haven't, I may have shown some passion in a debate, but this to sort of say, now I control your behaviour.
I don't control your behaviour remotely. You made the claim that you want to reach people on the other side. And what I'm saying is, this is not a way that's going to work for the following reasons. Because identity politics is divisive by its very nature.
The gaslighting is real. She pulls the victim card when it suits her, as all feminists do. Oh, you're calling me a hysterical woman. So you can never call them over-emotional, even when they blatantly are being over and emotional. Now Konstantine is scaring her, and he's being controlling. Just like that, you go from being an empowered, strong woman to scared, controlled victim. More red flags than a Chinese communist flag parade. I thought she was a strong, independent woman who cares about dialogue. She wants to reach the other side. This is exactly what happens when these feminist ideas crawl out of the caves and they interact with actual intelligent people. Now, the next bit is actually super good, in my opinion, where she tries to come at from a different angle. She tries to psychologize Konstantine and comes at him from a place of empathy that's more elevated, but she loses so hard.
I don't want to be told by a man that I'm communicating incorrectly just because I'm leaning across the table and showing some passion and that I need to, calm down. Well, what's behind that? It's the fear that I'm going to be controlled, and I was controlled before and I'll never be controlled again. And then you get triggered and you go, I
wasn't particularly triggered.
Well, you claim that you're not, but there are times when you really get cross.
No, I get cross when people misrepresent what I say. That pisses me off a lot.
And what's underneath that? What's that feeling?
I don't like when people lie about me.
But okay, but do you think I'm lying, or do you think I'm misunderstanding, or...
I think that in being offended or upset by something that I've said, you are then lashing out and trying to misrepresent me.
Okay, so you think I'm trying to misrepresent you,
yes,
rather than what you've said has landed with me in a way that I think that's what you've said.
I think
That's interesting.
Well, the reason for that is to win an argument, the easiest thing to do is to effectively say that somebody said something else. For example, like when you said, "Are you being hysterical?" Now, I know you were partly joking.
I was joking. I was smiling.
I know, but well, not quite. But part of the thing there is, when you do a joke like that, what you're really doing is you're hinting at a stereotype that exists in people's head, which is a man dismissing something a woman says because she's being hysterical, right? So you're trying to push me into that box where I don't want to go.
What's going on for you?
What's going on for me is I don't want to go in that box, because all I'm doing is exploring your argument in a fair way.
And why don't you want to go in the box? What's wrong with the box?
Because the box is not representing what I'm actually saying. When I'm simply taking...
But what's the emotion of, I don't like being in a box? Where's that come from?
It's not a box, it's the box that you're trying to put me in, which is a man who's telling a woman she's wrong because she's being hysterical.
So that box, which is you don't like things projected upon you, basically.
I don't like people describing me in public in a way that's inaccurate.
Okay, but
that's a pretty reasonable thing to feel.
Okay, so you're not really playing the game, which is what's beneath that. What's the human thing? So my thing is, behind that, there's, you might try and control me. That's nothing to do with you, right? That's me vulnerably going, and if I went below that, I'd be like, why don't I like being controlled? That makes me feel unsafe. And why do I feel unsafe?
Oh, well, that's easy for me. So, look, as a public person, what people say about me is what people will then go and believe, right? So people putting out false narratives about me is something that's necessarily something I'm going to be guarded against.
Sure. Okay. So you're not really playing the game, because the game is a sort of vulnerability piece. So it's sort of like it's.
Yes, but I'm not going to make something up to pretend to be vulnerable. I'm telling you that, like, I regard somebody misrepresenting the core of my argument, right, as something that is dishonest in an honest discussion.
Do you understand? Is it clear to you that there were times when I felt you did that to me?
That I misrepresented your argument?
Yeah, or you just misunderstood it, and it.
I don't think I ever misrepresented your argument.
Okay,
no, I didn't do that.
That's so interesting to me. So when I say something, and if you take it in your framework, sometimes you'll present it back to me, and I'll go, but that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant.
So when did I misrepresent your argument?
I think there were a bunch of times. If you watch it back,
could you give an example?
You will like the thing about indigenous people. Well, they're only such and such percent, they're a tiny percent, and I'm like, no, but that's not what it's about. It's not about the percentage.
But that's not misrepresenting your argument.
I don't think you can play this. I don't think you can get there. Watch the show, though. I think it'd be really, really interesting. I don't think you can get to the place that I'm trying to get. It's not about going over the arguments. It's about how you feel. Like when you say, "Oh, I get really that." So that's why I think what we're not really talking about.
I already answered your question. When somebody misrepresents what I'm saying.
Okay,
I'm naturally not going to like doing that.
Okay, I didn't try and misrepresent anything. I had a feeling of that's not what I said, or that's what you meant, or it was a feeling, so I pushed the ball back to you.
No, no
one was trying to misrepresent you.
You know what it reminds me of? We had this guy called Imran Ahmed on the show. And we talked about online censorship. And he made some very good points, and we were agreeing for about 90% of the interview.
Yeah.
And then I said something he didn't like. They didn't agree. And suddenly the mask came off, and he instantly came out as just like, nah, he started calling me names and doing
that's not nice.
all this stuff.
And your sophistry right now is both transparent and deeply disrespectful. And I warn you that most of your listeners will think to themselves, actually, Konstantine's being a bit of a dickhead right now.
And to me, I experience that a lot with people who are arguing from the position of high empathy. That happens quite a lot, where somebody pretends to be reasonable and they're having an agreement and whatever. But the moment I say something that makes them uncomfortable, as I said with the indigenous people and us being sophisticated, suddenly they show a different side to themselves.
How many times have we seen this? You guys have probably seen this with various different people, women, in your personal life, where they have such a profound lack of accountability that instead of just acknowledging they're wrong about something, all of a sudden you're lacking emotional intelligence. All of a sudden, they are just so high in empathy, they're not losing the argument, they're just trying to understand your point more, which is just such BS. You're gaslighting. And Konstantine nailed it. That he said these high empathy people generally tend to be the most aggressive when their backs are up against the wall. It's so true. When they see these male feminists, they pretend to be so morally elevated and so understanding. As soon as you start to dismantle their points of view, they become vicious in a passive aggressive way, which I think is kind of worse. I would rather somebody just give it to me between the eyes. I'll tell you what I think, you tell me what you think. I just never trust those people when they come from a place of high empathy. I would just rather prefer having the debate with people and telling me what they think and what they believe. Anyway, guys, really enjoyed that one. If you did enjoy it too, potentially hit that like button and subscribe. If you're new, check out the channel. Till the next time,